A quote from a recent article in the Los Angeles Times. The Supreme Court's conservative bloc sounded poised to strike down a free speech grounds a 102-year-old ban against corporations spending large amounts of money to elect or defeat congressional and presidential candidates. If the justices were to issue such a ruling in the next few months, it could reshape American politics. I'm Jonathan Helwink, and we explore this important issue on this episode of The Professors.
From across the city and the 7 city colleges of Chicago, broadcasting from 63rd and Halsted at Kennedy King College. Professors take the art of conversation to a higher degree.
If the Supreme Court overturns rulings that empowers government to limit corporate spending on elections, the impact could reverberate across the economy. Would corporate managers be tempted to use company treasuries for political gain rather than to maximize shareholder value? And do corporations have the same rights as individuals? Joining us on the panel to discuss this topic are Professors Henry Velarde from Malcolm X College and Max Galeas from Harry Truman College. Our special guest from the law firm of Holland and Knight is attorney and partner Victor Henderson. How could this decision reshape politics in America? Or would it? I'd like to begin our conversation with talking about the actual Supreme Court case. And that case is Citizens United versus the Federal Elections Commission. Max, why don't you get us started here?
Well, the FEC has since the McCain-Feingold, has a 2002, since around that time, a ban on electioneering communications, so that individuals or groups, really, organizations, cannot point the finger at or name federal candidates for criticism or even for praise. So Citizens United wanted to create a documentary ostensibly about Hillary Clinton. It was deemed to be anti-Hillary Clinton, against her campaign, against her candidacy. As a result of that, they were forbidden from receiving funds.
That ban, though, wasn't it put there because they received funding from corporations? If they wouldn't have received funding from a corporation, they could have put that video out on Hillary Clinton, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
sure.
It was
Absolutely.
just because they received that particular money.
Well, if we could just have a point of clarification, you mentioned electioneering communications. Mm-hmm. The part of the BCRA, which is the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act of 2002, it's Section 203, which states that you can't advocate in ads or in movies in this case, 30 days before a primary, which is what this movie would have been shown at, and they weren't allowed to show the ads either on TV to get people to go see this movie. Okay, and what is the counter argument here by the FEC?
Yeah, well, basically, what is it? The counter argument is that by doing this, they're going to give too much power to organizations and not individuals, and that corporations will be backing the winners, the people who are already in office, so that they will be running the country.
Okay. Who is Citizens United? Do we know
That's a
this?
small nonprofit group, and you know, it's similar to the I think it was called the speedboat guys who were
Swiftboat
guys who made the ads, right, that were attacking Kerry, I guess, in a couple of election cycles ago, and so depending on who you ask, I mean, some people will tell you that this is a decent, legitimate organization of Americans who have a point of view, and other people will tell you that they are a group of right-wing conservatives who are bent on, in this last election cycle, trying to go after Hillary Clinton. So I think, how you see that small group, Citizens United, is just based on where you stand and who you are.
And the argument's free speech, too, and that's how they're dressing it up, right?
Absolutely.
Corporate free speech. That's really what's at issue here. So that the law is, at this point, prevents, at least has strictures placed on corporate and union spending directly for or against a particular federal candidate. And now at this point, this particular law is now being thrown into question. There's a real possibility that the Supreme Court will overturn it and find for Citizens United.
It's the first case that Sonia Sotomayor will hear. So we really don't have any idea where she's going to fall on this case, this new Supreme Court.
Well, we do have a hint, though, because the Obama administration is backing the 102-year-old law and the 1947 law. Mm-hmm. So, and I can't remember his Solicitor General. I don't recall her name, but she's already spoken on the behalf of the Obama.
Mm. Yeah, I think another question, and you were talking about the narrow interpretation and the wide interpretation, is whether we see this Citizens United group as a corporation, mm-hmm. or is it a non-for-profit? Because they could find, in this case, that the McCain-Feingold bill doesn't apply to nonprofit organizations. It does apply to corporations, mm-hmm. but not nonprofits. So that's a kind of another wrinkle in this case, and we should say that we don't have to go back 60 years to understand the precedents here, which is something I want to talk about a little later. There were two cases in the last 20 years. One of them is called Austin versus the Michigan Chamber of Commerce, and the other one was from 2003, which is McConnell against the FEC. Mm-hmm. And in both of these cases, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of upholding campaign finance reform. In the 1990 case, the Austin case, the decision was made that a Michigan law that limited corporate contributions was fair because there is a fear that corporate money can influence elections too greatly. In the McConnell case in 2003, and this is one I find interesting, and I'd like to get your feedback on this, the holding is that the law is constitutional because money is not speech. Mm-hmm. Money is property. How do we make the distinction here between money as property or perhaps money as speech?
Well, I'm going to give you just one lawyer's view of it, and you know there are two different issues here. I think the first one is that lawyers and judges tend to get into these legal niceties. What's a corporation? What's a nonprofit? What's speech? What's money? And that's really, to me, an academic discussion that it may be of some interest to academicians, and it may be interest to judges and lawyers. But I think the real issue is what is the practical effect of the law and how it will affect people's lives. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really, for example, with Roe v. Wade, which is a Supreme Court case that everybody knows of, at the end of the day, what it meant was that women could get legal abortions. How does it affect me? And in this particular case, I think the issue is, from a pragmatic standpoint, how will it affect the lives of everyday Americans, and how will it affect campaigning and how we view what transpires especially during election season, when corporations or not will be given the ability to flood the airwaves with ads. I think that's the real issue, at least for me as a practicing attorney.
We're already dealing with a huge amount of money in the coffers of candidates for federal office. So much so that it's very difficult to run for office without moneyed interests being behind you. This sort of law, if it's weakened, or even if it's completely overthrown, could potentially just open the floodgates even further for even more moneyed interests to be involved in federal campaigning. We shouldn't
assume that the BCRA is the bulwark against corporate money in politics, because it isn't. It gives them the loophole of the PAC, the Political Action Committee, where they can give $50,000, $100,000 to an organization that could be linked to a candidate.
But as I said, it's not as if the moneyed interests aren't already involved. Here's a question of it being even more so. Well, and we really are talking about a radical shift in the way money can even be raised. The Obama campaign created a tremendous amount of money from private donors and did so publicly. The Dean campaign did it before Obama. So there are opportunities for this kind of involvement for private donations. But here we're talking about the possibility of even more public funding from large interests, which will be unaccountable, Counselor, as you said, unaccountable to individuals. And that's where the question becomes, I think, really important legally, perhaps even politically.
Sure. Not only that, you have to understand that there's a lot of money that corporations generate. Extremely amount. Take a look at the oil companies. We also have the situation where you have what happens if you have a company that's pharmaceuticals. Mm-hmm. You're a group that basically is not backing the insurance right now, the medical plan that Obama's trying to put in there. So they can influence the politicians right away.